just tell me your full name?
Including middle name or?
Maybe just the first two.
Yeah, it's Steve DeMaio.
You say my name is.
My name is Steve DeMaio.
Where'd you grow up, Steve?
I grew up in Southern Ontario. I was born in Hamilton. I grew up in Burlington, Ontario, Canada.
You start climbing out there?
Yeah, I started climbing on the Niagara Escarpment when I was 14 years old in 1978.
You put up a lot of routes out there.
I did put up quite a few routes. Yes, I did. Did my first ascent when I was 17. Would have been in 1982. And with one anecdote there with my first ascent, I'll digress a little bit. One of my early mentors was John Kandorp, and I'd met John. I had just started leading. I was probably leading around 5.5 at the time. And I had read in the Toronto section newsletter, he had given me a couple copies of it from the early 80s, where there was first ascents by John Kandorp on the Niagara Escarpment, and one of them was 5.5. And I went, I can lead 5.5. I'm ready to do a new route. So I spied this line at Mount Nemo, and there was an early guidebook of the day, and I knew this line hadn't been done. It was an overhanging kind of cracked groove line. And I went up and tried it and got on it, placed gear, boom, 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 grabbed onto the block with both hands. It pulled off, and I took a 20-footer. Missed my belay, missed the ropes. So I took a leader fall on my first ascent because of loose rock, kind of dusted myself up, went back up and finished it. And it was like heroin for me. Oh my God, it was like heroin. I was on fire, and that began a quest for new ground, pioneering adventure on the Niagara Escarpment that went from 1982 to, I believe, my last first ascent on the Niagara Escarpment was in 1980. I was involved with Pete Zabrock, John Kandorp, and myself. We were probably involved in, 150 or 200 first ascents on the Niagara Escarpment. It's also where I began my rope soloing exploits, and I started doing first ascents ground up on site on the Niagara Escarpment rope solo as well on the Niagara Escarpment. So I honed my rope solo technique on these 100-foot cliffs before I arrived out here. And there's a interesting digression. I don't know, maybe it's too much information, but in Royal Robbins' advanced rockcraft, he had a description of what they called the Steve Barnett rope solo system. And it involved a prusik and a chest pulley. And when you use this pulley, it would compress the knot so the rope would feed itself out, and you had to back it up with knots. Okay, so I started out using the Steve Barnett system, and I had done many first ascents with it. Eventually, I got onto some 511 ground, overhanging 511 ground, big roof, high off the deck, 70, 80 feet up on the Niagara Escarpment, and a hold busted off. I had a jam at the lip, and the piece of popcorn in the crack broke, and I took my first leader fall rope soloing. Well, I believe now that nobody ever took a fall using the Steve Barnett system. Like, are you kidding me? The prusik melted onto the lead rope, and it was stuck on the lead rope like a piece of dried spaghetti. And I peeled it off the lead rope. It did hold, but I'm like, if I took a real fall, this was almost a top rope fall because the piece was here, but it's still with rope stretch and the whole thing. Anyway, after that, I said, well, this is just stupid. I'm just going to use knots. So I started putting 4 carabiners on my Pat Littlejohn harness, and I'd tie an overhand knot, clip it in, give myself 5, 10 feet of slack, clip another one, I had 4 knots on my harness. And ultimately, I refined that technique. And ultimately, that's what I used in the Yosemite. That's what I used on Yamnuska. That's what I used on the South Face of Fable. This system of tying and untying knots on ground up to free climbing at 510.
So you're finding stances and just like untying these knots.
Oh yeah, you're hanging on. Well, you just got to hang on with one hand, and that's why I was using an overhand, because you could tie them with one hand. And I also chose not to use locking beaners, which some people would be twitching, like, "Oh my God, that's so dangerous." I'm like, yeah, but I'm going to be spending my fucking day undoing and undoing. Like, are you kidding me? So I would always leave 2 beaners with 2 knots. I'm like, okay, well, the chances of 2 coming unclipped is not 0, but it's very low. And then I would retie and add, right to left, and then I'd retie the 2, and then use up the 2, and then move the beaners to the other side, and kept, so it was a lot of, rope gymnastics. And then, you'd place a piece and you'd go, okay, well, I am not going to get a piece for 15 feet, 20 feet. So you know what? I'm just going to give myself 20 feet of rope, clip it in, climb up, place the piece, clip it, bam. And, you sort of plan your next piece. So you're not, 15 feet out on, trying to undo that knot kind of thing.
Makes sense.